So now that we have our site plan drawn out and we're more familiar with the user interface, we can now begin to assign grading objects to the geometry. If I come here to the Analyze tab, make sure that we've got our grading objects turned on, as well as our grading objects browser. In our tool palette, we can begin by placing objects by assigning them to the Civil 3D elements. As you select your grading object and apply it to the geometry, the floating palette will appear. You can choose to adjust settings before or after your selection. So let's go ahead and assign some grading objects to our geometry. So let's just start top to bottom. We will first assign our low point. So I'm just going to select, left click once here on the low point, and select this Kogo point here that I've marked as my low point within the drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and just left click on that again and hit enter. Okay. Nothing much needs to happen here. You can see here that this floating palette, the grading properties, pops up. We can name it if we want. Maybe we have multiple low points. We can change the color. Very simple. Nothing major here that we need to change. So I'm going to close that. You can now see that it is in our grading object browser. If I left click it, I can edit it. If I right click on it or select it here and right click, we can remove the low point. So you can remove the objects from the grading object browser by selecting it, right clicking, and removing whatever that object is. Okay. So that sets our low point. Exclusion zone. So if we want to not grade in certain areas, we can apply an exclusion zone to it. Same thing with parking lot. So you can see here, we've got a list of objects. We're going to come down here to parking lot and select that. So I'm just going to left click once on parking lot. And this gives me my outer extent of the parking lot. So I will select this outer polyline, this cyan line here, left click once, hit enter again. Some more properties here. So I'm just going to expand this. We can name it. We can use global constraints. We can customize the slope constraints. So if I use global, you can see it grays out some of these custom constraints. I can say no slope constraints. So I'm going to use custom slope constraints. I'm going to do a max slope. Maybe I don't want this parking lot to exceed 4% anywhere. Maybe my minimum drain slope is 1%. I'll leave that default. Aligned surface, exclusive drainage, minimum zone inclination, some things like that you can set. Depth of material, a very important part of this. You can set this depth of material to whatever you want. In this case, I'm going to set it to 1 foot. That way, as grading optimization runs the volumes and the calcs, it's not going to take your top surface, it's going to take the depth of that material into account. Is it a break line, yes or no? I'm going to leave that as yes. And then there's some follow global grading objectives. So balance of cut and fill, minimize earthwork, smooth surface, you can turn those on or off. Okay. Once you're done with that, you can just simply close out the grading properties. And that has been assigned now that parking lot to as a zone. Drain lines, let's assign a few more objects here. So I'm going to select my tool palette. Let's go to drain lines. If I have several objects, what I can do is I can select them, either isolate the layer or right click, do a select similar and isolate the object. So if I want to assign these to multiple objects, I can say select my drain line in this case. I'm going to window everything. I'm going to hit enter. And as I select those, you can see it's now a drain line. Not a lot of information that you have to give it. You can name it, tell it's a break line, yes or no. But that's about it as far as a drain line goes. And again, you can see it here in the object browser. Okay. Let me unisolate the objects there. Now, what about the overall boundary? So I want to limit my grading to be within a certain area. I'm going to choose that. I could define it a little bit more. I can choose maybe a smaller area, either option here. And I'm going to do this as a zone. So I'm going to select my zone. And I'm just going to use this yellow one here. hit enter. More settings in here. That's going to be just my zone. I want to limit to that area. I'm going to leave it default. Let's accept those. It's fine with me. And then we can do our curbs. So same thing as our drain lines. I want to select my curb. Right click, select similar, isolate objects again. Tool palette, and same routine here. We're just going to grab the curbs. One thing you can do, so again, I'm going to right click here. I'm going to change the properties before. So maybe my curb width, I'm going to say 0.5, my height as well, 0.5. That way I don't have to change them all individually. I can now change it here in my palette, select my curb, select everything, hit enter. Okay. So all those curbs are now in the grading object browser. There we go. Half a foot, half a foot. Building pads. We got building pad, we'll do a pond. Let's apply our building pad. So I'm just going to do the building outline itself. I could also do the concrete pad, maybe the concrete pad around it, but I'm going to do the building pad. Elevation, you can say between a minimum and a maximum elevation. I'm going to turn that off. That locks it into a set elevation there if I wanted it. Level grading pad, so I want that whole thing to be level. I'm going to make sure that is turned on. Depth of material, maybe I had some footings or foundation or something that you want to take out. I'm just going to throw a number in there of 2. Close that. Let's go on here to the pond itself. So let's select pond from our tool palette. Pond, I'm going to select that polyline. Perfect. And this gives us a lot of information about that pond. We can name it. So if we have multiple ponds, we can name this. Pond type, dry or wet. We're going to leave it dry. Minimum storage volume. So if you need a minimum storage volume, let's just say 25,000 cubic feet, we can key that in there, whatever that number is that we want. Maximum storage depth, I'm going to leave default of 5. Allow boundary change, I'm going to check that on because if it needs to be a smaller area, then let's build a smaller pond. Safety bench, I'm just going to turn all these on so we can look at some of these properties. Once that's turned on, and it gives us a little diagram here of what those are, I can come in here to the safety bench under berm. Now maybe I want a 5-foot berm, a foot of freeboard within that pond. Inside slope, we'll just leave it 3:1. And then my safety bench, I can give it parameters for that safety bench. So a little bit more information here that you can give to that pond. So again, you can take a look at some of these other things. We've got the reveal, we've got grading limits, sidewalks, accessible paths, all sorts of things that we can apply prior to running the grading optimization. So we've now assigned all this geometry a grading object. We are now ready to move on to verifying our setting and then on to perform the grading optimization.